Good morning, guys. Wow, it's all set up. That's very, very unusual because that's the very first conference happening for me after the COVID, and I haven't been giving any physical, bless you, talks on for real people. And usually that's what I remember from the past. Real talks never happen smoothly, right? So usually the first thing you need to explain is how to connect like your computer, which is all like specific, to a projector, and it eats up like 30% of the time. So we've done that so fast, and that's very cool. Thanks for showing up. That's a very cool for so many people having here. I expected to have like 15 or 10. Like after yesterday's party, that's really like appreciate. So cool. Making me a little bit more nervous, but still very nice. And for the lightning talks, I believe it's going to be like really lightning talks when it's like lightning strikes outside and people making talks on the inside. Cool. Yeah. So I used to give lectures for 10 years, giving like real academical stuff for students. So my talk will be so boring and very, very like academical, which I try to definitely avoid. So I have like my timer, not to talk one slide 40 minutes. So that's kind of the reminder for me just to move on. And I have like 30 slides. And so the limitation is 1 minute for the slide. If you see me talking like 10 minutes on the slide, just like raise your hand saying like, move on. Like you have some stuff to show. And the interesting stuff is usually at the end. So my name is Sergey Sergyenko. I've been doing Ruby like for 15 years at the moment, and I wanted to highlight two projects of my life that I'm really proud of. One is the longest project, which is Belarus Ruby user group. It's 12-year-old baby, so it's not still like it's still underage, but it's growing, and I hope to see this community getting really like mature after some time. And another one that is 1-year-old baby, which is Ruby News. So that's a news aggregator in the monthly digest with weekly updates. So we're trying to make more fun there. So if you're interested, check it out. And if you have any ideas about that, just come by and talk to me. So I work for Cybergizer, that software consulting company. And we are 6-year-old at the moment. And we're trying back to normal. So we switch fully remote, and now we're trying to open, again, like real people, real offices, and to some extent, like real interesting projects, which I'm excited about. And one of the projects that we are working at the moment, and some outcomes I will try to highlight today during the talk. So my talk is about data management. It's been like a buzzword for some years, starting with data science, machine learning, AI, big data. So let's do some definitions here. Oh no, before we go, just for me to understand, who work with data? Just raise your hand if you work with data. So not many. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's like 20%, which means that I cannot tell anything that I want. So some people could recognize me like fooling you. So I will try to stick with like real facts and not giving you like rubbish information. So what's the data? It's very hard to like data management specifically. It's very hard to give a really like holistic definition. So let's start with saying what it is not. So data management, it is not database management, obviously, right? So managing your database, it's not managing the data. So like different approaches and a different concept. It is not data governance, which is like really high level, and it is not ETL. Sometimes people, who knows what is ETL? Again, right? The same people. Okay, so the match like this, the perfect match. So in this case, like sometimes when you work with data, you say like, I do ETL, and people think that it's some kind of a black magic. Nobody knows, like mostly people don't know what is that. And like, oh, okay, you do ETL, good. Like you ETL engineer, that's fine. So ETL and data management is not the same thing, even though they intersect a lot. So who's data engineer in this case? So it's very easy to say it's not database administrator because we know that managing databases is different, and it is not data analyst. Sometimes people think that, data analytics, it is data management, which is not, and it is not data science. So data science, it's some kind of a buzzword, but not real, not really, and this is not about data management at all. So data management, it's a very huge, holistic topic that includes everything that was described before. So starting from structure and architecture and data, shaping it, protecting it, transforming it into some extent. So data management now brings the whole variety of professions. So if you go and Google or go to LinkedIn and see what kind of jobs you can get if you know what is the data, the 20% of the audience, you will get huge variety of professions with a very nice salaries. And so it's data engineer, data tester, database administrator, data architect, data analyst. I would love to be like data project manager or data scrum master. It is not invented yet, but you can bet on that. So kind of contribute toward some data spectrum of professions. And the good point that based on the statistics, the HR companies and the companies who do data, they are specified most required languages for data, which is 5 of them. And surprisingly, Ruby strikes back, getting into the data field as the required languages for people who are supposed to work with data. So answering to the question, is Ruby dead? If it's true, then it's a zombie Ruby kind of a stuff intruding into the data world. But on the opposite side, I think it is not, because data management and data stuff opens completely new horizons for Ruby and for Ruby engineers to work with that. So what is a Ruby engineer to some extent? So if you get back 10 years, like if you travel in time back, meeting Nick 10 years back saying about Trailblazer, or maybe just preparing to talk about that, you will see that a Ruby engineer back then is responsible for everything in a project. So you do, starting with choosing which framework, Rails, not Rails, and 10 more different options, doing the backend and the front end, dealing with Capistrano or other stuff like Chef, dealing with infrastructure, of course, writing tests, and dealing with data in the databases. And so nowadays, if you're a Ruby engineer, you don't really want to deal with anything but Ruby. So even we have this separation for Ruby engineers and Ruby API engineers. So those who do Ruby, and those who do Ruby API. Which brings now, after 10 years, more professions, like in data. So for example, Rails engineer. So you can find somebody who say, hey, I'm a Rails engineer. And if you talk to them, surprisingly, not of them use Ruby. Not all of them use Ruby. Sometimes they don't know how to use Ruby. You interviewing them, you ask questions, and they use Rails. And they are surprised that Ruby works differently. So I'm not going to talk anything about front end here. So just skip that. DevOps. So DevOps started with Chef, which was really huge and step forward. And they definitely know how to use Ruby. What is Ruby? But again, they apply it differently. QA automations and data engineers. So if you go and see data engineers, with no regards to the language, even Python. So if you ask what do you do? I'm a data engineer. What is your language? Python. You ask them Python, and they cannot do anything but scrapers and parsers, use some academical models. So not kind of a cool. And for me, now, it's a really good point for being a Ruby engineer is the mature guy, real senior guy who understands how application works, all the architecture, plus how data interacts with the application. So I think if you do Ruby, in most of the cases, you can wear a hat of data engineer with like, if you do like migrations, if you prepare data, if from time to time you need to insert some kind of a like large amount of data in your database, in your resume, you can say, I'm working like with ETL, I'm doing ETL. Nobody really, wanted to be like database administrators, but we do that. Still, it's like normal process to doing like database management and working just with software, right? So we need to write some code that makes the application work. So general development. And when it comes to the responsibilities in a team or running, like getting to the new project, you need to figure out where is your responsibility. So if I'm writing Ruby code, then where is lived? It's lived like on the backend side, on the server, or it's lived somewhere like between like cloud or third parties or something. So it turns now that as we separate in different roles, nobody wants to work in this red square selected block. So it's like terra incognita. So it happens, but you're not sure who's responsible for that. So who should prepare data? Who should do parsing? Who should do normalization? Who should really care about different stages of your data? And you have to care. Like, you really have to care. Because if your application growing, you need to think about maturing your app. You need to think about like how make this app not to be data dependent. Because writing your code in a very isolated way can lead you someday doing huge refactoring or throwing it away because you didn't think upfront that like your application is not suitable for dealing with some kind of a data. So you should care when you work with like seeding your databases, when you work like preparing, testing, testing, performance, integration, like multiple environments. You need to care about you clean your data. How many of you knows how to delete data from the database? Just raise your hand. And how many of those who keep your hand, like how many of those do that? Like really in production system, how many of you like really clean up the data? Because like not that many. Because what we usually do, we like just get more data, like we're greedy on the data, we just put it somewhere there and we think like, okay, one day, maybe in the future, we will develop something, we're gonna need that, we hire machine learning stuff, something, buzzwords, and this data is gonna be needed. It is not. That's not true. So deleting data is gold. Migrating data between different databases. So those of you who used to use like Heroku, and now facing the issues like moving out from Heroku, choosing what's gonna be the, not of course like for pets project, but for those projects that has some kind of a value, how to move data out of it. So how do you like get data from one server and put it to the another one server? For example, if you cannot expose it anyhow in public, so you cannot like download it to the computer and upload it to WhatsApp, like to the system administrator or to somebody who can do that. Preparing data. So more data we have, less information we get. So more data we can gather from the internet, less information we can extract from it. So normalizing data, cleaning it up, that's very important. And lastly, so actually, what is my talk is really about? I told you, right, about like too many academic things, right? So we are still on the 10th slide, and I still have 20 minutes, running good. It's compliance and security, which I don't think people accept seriously at the very beginning. When you start working with your application, you think like, okay, when we grow, we'll do audit, we'll find somebody who can help us to deal with security, so let's do quick and dirty solution now, and then we'll fix it back, which is not true. And that's we will see a little bit later in a couple of slides. So the last question I want to like answer finally, is this Ruby good enough to deal with data? There is a number of data warehouses, data shops that manage data warehouses, that do data logistics and do like a lot of other data stuff. And in this year, they published again another report that says that we, in like data world, we don't really care about performance. So if we need more performance, we buy more servers. Like if we need to do like more data processing, we can get more powerful machines. And what do we really care? It's about human who work with data. So it's more important for us to produce code faster than to produce faster code. In other words, if we can solve a problem with one line in Ruby, it's way more better than produce it a little bit more efficiently with 20 lines in Python. So if we manage to build application in a like DDD manner or whatever, with a little bit of a highlight architectural view, it's way more better than write single file and all the logic with no highlight using Emacs or Vim, whatever is like hard code, and make it like super performant. So they say like 80% of their work is just scraping and preparing data, which Ruby is absolutely perfectly suits, instead of running some highly performant stuff. So, and for this, like if Ruby is good, and that's proven now, so you can do Ruby for data management. So if you were thinking about like switching your job next, you can actually apply for yourself the Ruby data management. So do you need to know SQL and like, no, like let's start from ETL. Do you need to know ETL in order to start this like Ruby data engineering career? And the answer is yes. So actually, if you don't know how to work with this stuff, it's going to be harder, at least to get, into the point where people are working with data. But is it like really necessary? Like, is this? It's like with SQL, right? So you have to know it. So if you go for interview, people will ask you, how do you work with SQL? But after you get a job, it's not necessarily you're going to use it. So you know how it works. You like understand how the system design and structure. So the same for ETL. You have to know those tools. You have to know how to apply it. You have to know the high-level structure and the process. But all those tools, in most of the cases, are really, really with high thresholds. So you need to dig deeper, and it's very hard to connect it to the app. And lastly, this will bring you to the vendor lock. So you will probably have another language to implement like ETL tooling into your app, and as you grow, you will hire separate like engineers or separate department who will deal with it. So what's the main and general tips for you to start doing like Ruby data engineering, or to at least consider yourself as a Ruby data engineer? So if you don't know how to deal with N+1, learn it. That's not only the question that is asked on the technical interview, that's the thing that you really need to care when you do like working with data. You need to care about like merging, joins, understand how database works, how high-level tools like ORMs works, and how to optimize it. Because sometimes when you design like structure of your database and it's empty, it's easy to work with that. As soon as it has data, it works differently. What is indexes? How to use this approach? I've heard sometimes people say, just put indexes everywhere. The indexes are great, just put it everywhere. Or another good tip, use it as much as you can. Like, use indexes as much as you can. That's the solution. That's not true. So you need to understand how they work, what kind of indexes they are, how to apply them, and so on and so forth. That's a good question. Who knows the difference between destroy all and delete all? Okay. And who, you know how it works, and how, do you really use that in your production system? Like destroying all data? Okay, that's good. So that's very good. Don't destroy your data in production. That's like a very good tip. So if you, if you know how those tools works, if you read it through, the significant difference is that eating like so many, like if you use destroy all, that is so heavy procedure. It so nicely works for you to like really clean up all the data, but it's so heavy in comparison to delete all that is like super fast, and it gives you like a lot of inconsistent data. So using those tools and understanding how to apply them, and that's just like one example. There is a lot of other things for inserting data as well. It's very good. Don't be greedy about the data. So if you don't need the data, don't get it. Like it's like with food, right? So if you eat some not healthy food or good food, you have some kind of a mechanism that your body says like, oh, I don't need it, get it back. So database doesn't do that. So we have to care about it. So database eats everything that we give her, right? So we give her some data, it eats it up. It's getting bigger and bigger. Sorry for acronym, right? I've seen you. That's yours, but this one I invented, right? Okay, so it's still DDD. We'll figure out how to shorten this one. So how to say data dictated development. So avoid data dictated development. So you are masters, data is not. So you have to make your data serve you, but not make the application on the opposite side. So we have so crazy data. We need to figure out how to manage with it. Just delete it all, shape it in a good in a good form, and get it to the app. So that's the introduction. Now let's let's think about the use case. So we work with the healthcare application that is HIPAA compliant. And when we first think HIPAA, so it's like, this is something like hippopotamus. Like this is so funny. We're not gonna really care about it. And when clients ask, like, do you know how to work with HIPAA compliance? We say, yes. Yes, we know how to work with HIPAA compliance. Googling it like aside, it says like, that's the medical compliance for the app. Easy. Not easy, like, no problem at all. We'll do that. So now we work with this project. And so we inherited some parts of the data from other vendor providing this data structure. And it looks like the vendor didn't know what is PII, as we didn't know a little bit later as we're picking it up. So we inherited a lot of data that is really sensitive, and nobody ever care that some data doesn't, like, some data, it's PI, this like personal identification compliance, that is exposed everywhere. So, and we treat it as a normal database. So, yeah, okay, like usernames, like patient names, what the heck is the difference, right? So if somebody who goes to the clinic is the same users as they go to the like supermarket, we were gonna treat them the same way. And along with that, we have a few more like challenges as we figure out that using the this PI data bring us the idea that we cannot actually identify users. So when we insert a lot of data, we cannot identify that they are unique. So because until they provide you consent that you can use like my last name, or like first name, last name, whenever like data can identify you, which becomes like a unique user, it's just a non-unique user. And we scraping and inserting a lot of data, and it turns out like we figure out that we have so many duplicates in the database because we don't have ability to validate uniqueness until people say you can use my data there. It turns out we cannot deploy this app anywhere we want. So if we have HIPAA compliant application, we cannot just throw it on the Amazon like, hey, this is gonna be our staging, bam, Amazon works with that, like test it. It looks like we have to use some kind of a compliant hosting, and we found one. I've blurred it a little bit just to not make it publicly, because it's like very good saying bad things about something. But those who use the same hosting will know. So that's a very bad thing. You don't have any abilities to manage your actual infrastructure. So it lives somewhere there, and you can send email to technical support with attached some kind of a SQL stuff to execute that and pass you back the result. And business, as it was healthcare, had like a really huge demand on analytics. So they wanted to use like Power BI, Tableau, whatever tools that can build them graphics, build projections. When they were small, they use Excel. So what the previous vendor did, they download all the database in CSV, give them to the business owners. The business owner use Excel spreadsheet to build pivots, like pivot tables, whatever. And after a few months, as the database started to grow, it's absolutely like Excel doesn't. Okay, it's not working actually. And we cannot like extract this data and give it to the third party. So you cannot connect whatever service that you have to your application. Even like data monitoring, for example, if you want to use New Relic or whatever, unfortunately, there is no chance for you to manage that. And because we already signed the contract, we get all this data that has a lot of like exposure. There is no chance to manage it. There is no chance to use like the way how we know how data works. For example, how to create a user that is not unique. I have no idea. We started to think about, okay, if we cannot do like real compliance with the system that we have, because it's too late to redesign it from scratch, because everybody, do that. When you get application that you're not working from scratch, you say like to the client, okay, let's, like those guys who developed that, they were badass, right? We're gonna do that right. Let's start it from scratch. We give you 10% discount. So, and like all the 2 years of development, just let's throw it away, it's rubbish. No use. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that. So we had to use what we have. And to fix that, it's too hard. So we decided to make it, at least if it's not perfect now, just to hide, like do some hacks, just to hide this sensitive data and try to use it as a normal data, but at the same time, make it not too bad in order for users to use that. So we decided to, in order to make it a HIPAA compliance, to use data obfuscation. So what is data obfuscation? Whoever heard or used data obfuscation in your system? Okay, I'm not gonna ask. The same people, really, same people you're raising your hand. Okay, so I know those guys who work with data use data obfuscation. So that's a good tool. We learn that data obfuscation can be a compliant way of managing sensitive data. That was enough for us to make a decision. So if we can, like without learning any kind of a HIPAA compliant stuff, we see that data obfuscation make us HIPAA compliant, fine. Let's use this one. So benefits are obvious. We use the same data with the same volume, with the same quality, with the same standards, but it's not real. And this data, it's not generated data because it has all things to pretend that all this data is connected. So it's not dummy data, even though it is hidden. We needed to use it for business intelligence, to give it to business to build like high-level graphs. We also needed it for testing, because we couldn't do any testing with this super strictly high security, like compliance level hosting. So we built like Heroku and put all the data in the public Heroku, which is easy for us, right? But it's the same data, but we can expose it anywhere because there is no use for anybody and there is no traceability back to get this like real data from the system. We didn't use much of this list, but for example, if your system is big and deployment process takes long time, for example, you have some migration that lock your database, more data you have, more outage for the app you can get, and you would never test it until you simulate it. So having real amount of data on your staging integration environment really gives you a clue how your app behaves and how you should manage it. And the last one, for design people and for people who actually build like the user flow, or for non-technical people, it's a very nice way to give them feeling of the whole application workflow, because it doesn't, again, it doesn't have like dummy data. So there is three, even like there's many more techniques, but we needed to choose one of three techniques that you can use for data obfuscation. So the first one, encryption, which didn't work for us, right? So it saves data, even it provides you some chance to get this data back, but it's completely not readable. So if you start, using your application, and instead of like usernames, you have this kind of a hash, all your HTML stuff, goes away. You cannot distinguish what is those emails, how to pretend those emails we can send somehow. So perfect, but not suitable for us. Another one was tokenization of the data, which is kind of the same approach as encrypting it, but with the ability to like really get it back. So if you want to hide some data or do not show data for everybody, even like in your production system, you can use tokens. And those tokens are getting back from the data for those people who can be like exposed to this data, or data to be exposed to these people. Didn't work for us as well. It's a little bit nicer, but still not usable. And data masking. So data masking is absolutely perfect, because it takes your real data and makes the same real data, but it's not related to your specific. So it makes actually like obfuscation of the data in the way as the data is shaped. So if we have US phone numbers, it will generate you fake US phone numbers. If you have like Arabic names, it will get back you Arabic names, but with not real people. And we started like to search. No, sorry, this one, the not one you need to see. And we started to search which tool can do some kind of a data obfuscation for us. And it turns to be that Faker was the one, and it's, again, port from Perl to Ruby, that was so very well shaped. Even like Python, PHP, and a few more languages use the same approach for Faker as it's done in Ruby. So I think this one is the real reason to be proud for Ruby community, having this guy to be like implemented. For those who never use Faker, that's the library that generates fakes data. And it has a number of dictionaries that you can use. For example, like this is the basic library that Faker has, with like a huge database in it. So you can actually structure your database with the like particular specific. Even like if you Game of Thrones fans, you can find like a specific for the context of like a real media. And even like quotes. So Faker has quotes of smart people, and you can play with it like different people. And of course, Mats is one of them. But Faker is not going to work. So Faker provides fake data. So it's good for seeding data. So you can use this data for factories. You can build like automation testing suite for with Faker. But our case was a little bit different. So we have already data. So we don't need to populate data in the database. But we need to find a way to like somehow, in a smart way, hide it. And there's a lot of like tools that provides it using masking, but it's again providing very limited amount of templates. So you can get the, for example, Postgre dump, use some kind of an online tool like line, terminal line tool to replace all sensitive data, but it's going to be ugly. So it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 5 variants, and that's it. So you're going to have like the same users with the same name, like, bah. And a faker that gives like super cool data. If you don't know like what to read, this is my know-how. Read faker. Install it on your app. Just open news, get news, and it will give you random news. So you can read news from a faker. It's so cool. Yeah, know-how, thank you. If you don't know how to comment your posts, or you want to post some, commands on like LinkedIn for HR people who are sending you some stuff, use faker. Just get some quotes, it has commands. It is so cool because they are like really good commands. Sometimes I really think I need to follow the advice that fakers give me. So use it. But we didn't find a solution. So, because we're all Ruby engineers, we decided to create one. So what if we make faker to be working with production database? It's like, yay, that's a good idea. Let's let faker fake the production database in the way as we need. And again, there is no solution. We asked a few people and they say, because there is no solution, probably that's a bad idea, nobody would need that. Maybe it is. But we decided to go our way, and we started like implementing this tool called Grazer. So Grazer, not like a trailblazer, but Grazer, I hope, 10 years back, we'll have multiple talks about this one here. So the grazer from English is the guy who is eating food in the store, like you're getting like, oh, it's peanuts. It is like it's exactly the same what we needed for this guy. So you need to go into our data store and randomly eat some food and replace it with a nutshell. So in the basic version, which is like 0.0.0.1, the grazer has a pretty simple interface. Let's see, we have this model. It's not real data. We are safe, I hope. So we have the EHR records, which is electronic healthcare records for US. It gives us some idea of PAI, so some data that is sensitive and shouldn't be used in the app. So we cannot expose it there. In the same way as you cannot, for example, like store credit card numbers, so we cannot store like EI number, first, last name, and a phone, and the rest of the things. So it's illegal. You cannot like have it in your database, but we have already, right? So it's there. What are we gonna do with that? So Grazer goes as the standard generator. It scans all the structure of your models, parses it, and gives you a number of configs. So it generates you the same structures you have in your models. Maybe it's not perfect. Still, we use it that way. And for each and every config, you could identify a number of rules for which fields should be hidden, which are of them sensitive, and what's the strategy for obfuscation. So at this stage, we just use faker, just to fake this data in the way as we need, keeping uniqueness of the data, keeping the proper way of generated like regions for the phone, addresses. For example, if we need to use a particular zip code, which is not PAI, so we can use zip codes freely, but the address should be related to the particular zip code, so we can use zip code for the faker to generate a particular address within the range of this zip code. For the future, this one is not limiting us, so we can use any other dictionary, even your own, like your built-in dictionary, to get into the config files and generate data that makes it work for other users. So you get it. You get it in the config, and then the second one and the most, I think, questionable issue: how to then extract this data, because it's like already sensitive, but nobody knows. So how we extract this data in the way that we again do not break anything. So we cannot load the dump. So we cannot dump database and download it, and we cannot use environment of our server. So the only way, and maybe this is the way, it's to generate the dump in a number of SQL inserts that you can use against the, your replica database to get already obfuscated data, for example, in testing. And you can make like its full set, like all volume of the data, or limited set. You can say like, I need every, 100 record from the database just to give some kind of a slice. And, and you never get your database out of the server. You never get like actual dump from the server, but you get the instruction that gets this data to the place where you need that. So, and here it comes. This is the result. So it gives you exactly the same. It still works not perfectly with zip codes. It gives you like perfectly shaped data that nobody would actually recognize as is faked. So this is data, it's connected, it has a number of models, different models has comments, we generate comments, and do the rest of the things. The last thing that is important here is as we start maintaining two kinds of data. So one data is real, one data is fake. But the fake data is important in the same way as the real data. So we don't want to, recreate all the time the data that is faked and it is used already in different sources. So we need to track the consistency of the data every time that they want to get a new slice. So first, before, for example, like on a daily routine or weekly, you decided by yourself, you have a job that validates the consistency of the data, not of the structure of the data again, but of the data. So it's like any new records, any updates for existing records. You need to go through the old records and see like, okay, this is the delta, and the next worker that gives you new slide inserts new and updates the ones that were actually changed. And update. So you update the data for the source that you need that. So you validate it on the initial source, and you update it to the source for the destination. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Please, questions.
Thank you for presentation. Can you go back to the syntax of grazer? Yeah, I have two questions. Can you, for encrypted password, reference, for example, like ID? Because usually encrypted password is using a salt to create a real encrypted password. So just as an example, can you reference other fields?
That's a very bad idea, of course, to have like the same passwords for all the records. This one is used just to give an idea that you can put any data for your.
I know, but yeah. I'm asking if you can reference other fields from other fields.
Other fields from, for example, like encrypted passwords related to the generated, like how it was done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It's like it keeps the old data and the old connection. So we do not actually change the, like if you have password and you have the other fields that makes this password like encrypted, decrypted, and to some extent, it has the same way of joining these tables. It's not working in this version, so I'm just imagining a little bit. But of course, yeah, it keeps it linked. So if you have, not for example for the password, if you have like different models that rely one to another one. So for example, if you have some kind of a record and the statement or report, and in the report there is used first and last name, you could identify that here is the strategy. After you change the first and last name of the patient, you need to go to extract for the report and do not forget to make this data again. Yeah. So yes, it is linked. Now we do that manually, but in an ideal world, it should work like automatically.
That's amazing. Thank you.
And what is the second question?
It was about this.
Okay.
Hey. So I have a question about, for example, what if one of the fields is like important, like the value of this field is important for like the structure of the table. So for example, if a patient is underage, so it's like based on the date of birth field, and maybe you, in that case, you need a separate record, like reference to other table for a like caretaker or someone like that. Like so like how do you ensure that your data will be consistent, like in some, you know, that the data will be reasonable? Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this project is related to kids under 3 years. So that's like early intervention. And we really care about the like age for kids. For example, as soon as they age on a particular date, like in August, they turns 4. We have to like we have a number of logic that makes, for example, like therapists to notify parents that their kids are out of the the range of age that is applicable for early intervention, and they need to switch to another one. So in this case, you have 2 options. The first one is to use your own generator for like this specifically related data, or if, for example, we work with like zip codes or data regions, if it's not exist in Faker, you add it as like standard library. It's very easy to contribute to there, because like Faker out of the box allow you to use your own libraries in the same fashion as you do. But so how we do that? We change the date, like date birth, with a small random number of days. So we actually losing the precise of exact the birth date when they change, but we're providing untraceability in this case. So it's like adding some kind of a like a couple of days back and forth, changes it completely and makes it absolutely untraceable. Yeah, like it's like a hack, but it works. Thank you.
What do you think about active record encryption in the context of PII data obfuscation?
It's good to encrypt data when you can. Like you have always encrypt your data in case it's like sensitive data. No, like sorry, cancel this answer. Like if you cannot store the data on your own, do not store it. Like if you can use third parties that can store sensitive data for you, like use EHR system that can hold records of your patients or everything that is related to them. Use third party and work with the metadata. So the answer is do not store or try not to store sensitive data on your own. But if you need to store it, think about like encryption for the records. That's the must. You have to encrypt it. And in case of data obfuscation, the data that was encrypted, and then you get decrypted it back, you obfuscate it, and they use like encryption and decryption on your development, like staging, development, whatever, with different keys. It doesn't matter. But you substitute data with fake, then encrypt it and use it for like integration testing, development, whatever. So they do not interfere one and another one. So encryption is hygienic. We have to care, and obfuscation, that's convenience.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions, one a small one and one big one. Let's start with the smaller one. I've actually stumbled upon this problem before, exactly using Faker to obfuscate the data without the nice gem, of course. And the main problem I ran into was the performance. If the database was big enough, then basically generating Faker data for each row, it's extremely slow. How do you handle that?
You mean like it's slow because of Faker, or it's slow because of iterating through the whole records in your database?
Iterating through the records because you have to fetch the data and generate Faker.
That's the only solution that we have here is to this one. Like you've done it once, and you try to keep it consistently by validating the changes of the data and updating it instead of inserting all the data over and over and over again.
Okay. The second question is slightly more complex because when I use this kind of approach, I found that there is some, let's say, hidden data in terms of counts of the records, which will help you unencrypt the data in terms of being able to identify particular records, especially outliers. Like, for example, if you have, let's use your data, like caretaker that has like 7 children. Even though you obfuscate the details of those children, you can still identify that these people are family because of account, and this particular person is a caretaker for this family because it's the biggest one in the database. Do you guys handle this kind of cases with like randomly deleting or adding records?
No, we didn't face exactly the same way of like data traceability in order of some kind of a, similarity, just to keep in that. But we had a huge issue, the slide that I just skipped. So thanks for asking. We're gonna reuse this one. Sorry, this one. But we had like excessive data exposure issue, which means that even we obfuscated some data in other fields that are not sensitive, therapists can provide sensitive information in the way that it's not expected to be there. And for example, when we use third parties like New Relic, we had leakage of the sensitive data into the third party. So we'll look through the New Relic dashboard and see like, what the heck, right? So, and you have this kind of a like data. It's not exactly like what you're saying, like this back data traceability, but it gives us a feeling that when you have not like related data that is not obviously like should be obfuscated, that's like human factor. And you cannot like get a silver bullet. So for all of those cases, and that's why we actually keep it here in the way that you can, like this. So if you know that there is some kind of situation that you can identify, you just can write custom things that like, for example, randomly changing the number of kids for the families.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
How often is it of a problem that you change or randomize the structure? I would expect this to be more of data analysis problem that when your data shows that there is, as was mentioned, this many outliers, and the data suggests these and some trends. When you randomize, be it delete or increment some attributes, you manipulate that. And judging from your experience, how often it is a problem, or it's not really that important?
So let me, is this a question of validation of generated, or could you rephrase it?
Yeah, sure. So when you have those number of children, right? So
yeah.
that you can identify that these records are associated. When you randomly delete, I don't know, 2 of them, you change the data in general, the trends. What they mean, what can be, information can be inferred. So
okay, so yeah, maybe the answer for your question is that this situation is a little bit static. So
okay.
Change it once, you don't need to change it every time you update the data. So if you just obfuscated the number of children for a particular family, or like a particular therapist, or whatever, you're not going to change it every time you, like, it's not like randomizer that runs constantly. So change it at once, it would perfectly fit. If this data somehow interfere to the like analytics or any other reports, it's kind of a problem of reports. So,
okay.
Yeah, because like this is the data that you have, and you know that you cannot like blindly rely on the exact quality of the data. So when you do like analytics, higher you get. Like on a helicopter view, it's like perfect, and gives all the trends, getting lower, 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 and the deeper, of course, like the the precise is going to be losing. So if you do like analytics for how number of children in a family relates to the overall usage or frequent usage of the particular service, of course, this like you cannot get actually any insights. But if you get on the very top saying like the overall trend that in December, people using 40 or 50% less services of the therapist because of holidays, that's a very precise data. So again, like human factor. So you cannot like do that manually.
All right, we're running out of time. So thank you, Sergey.
Thank you guys.